By the time I reached the porch, my throat was tight enough that breathing felt like a task. The white wicker chairs still sat side by side, facing the water, one cushion slightly sunken where Grandma always sat. The wind chimes above the doorway jingled weakly, their sound thin without her soft laughter beneath it. I placed my hand on the doorframe and whispered, "Hi, Grandma," because I couldn't walk inside without saying something to her first. Not after all the years she was the only one who made me feel like I mattered. Inside, the house felt smaller than I remembered. Grief has a way of shrinking everything: ceilings, walls, people. The kitchen smelled faintly of oranges and lavender, her signature mix. For a moment, I let myself stand there, eyes closed, breathing it in as if scent alone could anchor me. But footsteps brought me back. My mother appeared in the doorway, lips pressed into a polite, paper-thin smile. "Oh, you're here." You'd think she might hug me, or cry, or at least pretend she was glad I'd flown across the country on one day's notice. Instead, she gestured vaguely toward the living room. "We need to talk." Brooke was already perched on the couch, tanned legs crossed, phone in hand, though she pretended not to be texting. Her face was made up just enough to look naturally beautiful, the kind of effortless perfection she'd been praised for since she was 12. My father stood near the window, back straight, jaw set, staring out at the row of 10 cottages that lined the water's edge. The same cottages that made up most of Grandma's life's work, the same cottages I had spent every summer maintaining with her, sweeping porches, repainting shutters, helping tenants move in and out, learning how each home had a different heartbeat. My heart dropped. They were already thinking about them, claiming them. I took a seat across from them, feeling suddenly like a stranger in the house where I'd learned to braid my hair and bake cornbread and fix a broken fence post without asking for help. All those small lessons that ended up becoming the backbone of the life I built miles away as a software engineer in Austin. A life I chose because independence was safer than needing people who didn't notice when you slipped through the cracks. My father cleared his throat, a sound I'd heard before every disappointment he ever delivered. "We've discussed the estate." Estate. Not Grandma. Not her name. Not her life. Estate. My mother folded her hands on her lap. "We're going to take care of everything. The cottages, the finances, her belongings, all of it." I blinked. I thought we'd go through things together." She smiled coolly. "There's no need for that." I felt the air leave my lungs, slow and heavy. "Did she leave a will?" Brooke let out a soft scoff, as if I'd asked something offensive. My mother didn't even hesitate. "No, there's no will. Everything passes to us automatically." Automatically. Like none of it mattered. Like 40 years of love and community and service were something you could just scoop up and claim without blinking. "But she talked about updating her paperwork," I said quietly. "She told me months ago she was organizing everything." My parents exchanged a look. A quick, sharp one, the kind that says, "She remembers more than we wanted her to." My father's voice tightened. "She must not have done it." "She would have told you if she had," Brooke added, flipping her hair. "She wouldn't hide something from you, right?" My stomach twisted. That was exactly what they wanted me to believe. That anything I couldn't prove didn't exist. That Grandma leaving something for me was just a fantasy. But something in my bones rejected it outright. "She was a planner," I said. "She labeled every drawer. She kept receipts for 20 years. She wouldn't leave her homes without instructions." My mother's expression cooled another few degrees. "Well, she did. You've been away so long, Harper. You wouldn't know." There it was. The old weapon. The same one she'd used since I left home at 17. The accusation that my independence was abandonment, that my distance was selfishness, that the job and life I built were proof I didn't belong to this family anymore. I straightened my spine. "I'd like to see whatever paperwork you have." "There's nothing you need to see," my mother said quickly, a sharpness slipping into her voice. "We've handled it." "Handled what?" I asked. Brooke rolled her eyes. "God, Harper, why are you being difficult? Mom and Dad are doing the responsible thing." Responsible? The word made me want to laugh and scream at the same time. My father finally turned from the window, his face as unreadable as stone. You're not involved in this. You've built your own life elsewhere. Let us take care of what's ours. What's ours? I repeated slowly. Grandma meant the cottages to be for the community, for the tenants she cared for us, my mother snapped. After everything we've done for this family, we deserve something. Everything they've done. Meaning raising Brooke like a porcelain doll while treating me like the house pet that kept finding its way out the door. Meaning the years they dismissed every award I earned while celebrating Brooke's lowest level accomplishments as if they were Nobel Prizes. Meaning the reason I learned early that I had to build my own life, my own career, my own backbone. I looked at them, really looked. My mother's tight smile, my father's clenched jaw, Brooke's careless entitlement. And I realized, with a clarity that felt like a knife slicing through fog, that this conversation wasn't new. It had been happening my whole life, just with different subjects, different stakes. Grandma didn't raise me to step aside, I said quietly. Brooke scoffed again. She raised you to fix things and paint shutters, congrats. My hands curled into fists in my lap, but I didn't let anger speak for me. I learned long ago that anger only made them feel justified. What they couldn't stand, what always unsettled them, was honesty spoken without shaking. I want to see her documents, I said again, steady. My mother stood abruptly, gathering a stack of folders from the coffee table. There's nothing here for you. I reached for them, but she pulled back sharply, her lips tightening like she was hiding something inside them. And then she said it, the line that snapped something open inside me. You should be grateful we're not asking you to help pay for the funeral. The room went silent. Even Brooke froze, as if she knew their cruelty had crossed a line. Grateful, as if love was a bill I owed them, as if my distance hadn't been a survival strategy, as if my grandmother's life and death and legacy were inconveniences they were generously dealing with. I stood so slowly the chair barely shifted. My voice came out soft, controlled, but my heartbeat thundered. Grandma would never have left things the way you're saying. My father's jaw twitched. Believe what you want. But I wasn't believing. I was knowing. I grabbed my keys, shaking now not from fear, but from the electric voltage of resolve. I'm staying at the cottages tonight, I said, and I'm going to find out the truth. Brooke rolled her eyes again, but this time something flickered behind the arrogance. Fear of what I might uncover, of what she and our parents already knew. My mother's voice turned cold as tile. Don't start trouble, Harper. I looked at her, really looked, the way you examine something that has been familiar your whole life but suddenly feels foreign. I'm not starting anything, I said quietly. I'm finishing what Grandma May intended. I left before they could respond, walking out into the fading orange light where May's wind chimes whispered above me. My legs felt weak, but my spine felt stronger than it had in years. Because something was wrong, something was missing, something was being hidden, and whether my family liked it or not, I was going to find it. Not because I wanted the cottages, but because they weren't mine. They were hers, and I was the only one left who seemed to remember that. I hadn't planned on driving straight to the cottages after leaving my parents' house, but my body took the turns without asking my mind for permission. The sun was dipping low by the time I pulled up beside Cottage 1, casting the row of pastel homes in soft coral light. The Florida Keys had a way of looking peaceful, even when your life was tilting off its axis, and for a moment I stood there trying to breathe through the tightness building in my chest. The cottages had always been my refuge. Every summer from age 7 to 17, I'd spent weeks here with Grandma May, sanding porch rails, trimming bougainvillea, fixing shutters that blew off during storms, painting trim in shades she called joyful and tacky. She believed houses were like people, the ones that carried the most stories needed the most care. And these 10 little houses carried decades of them. I walked toward Cottage 4, where the gravel crunched under my shoes, and the air smelled of grilled fish from a neighbor's porch. It should have felt like home, but something about the quiet felt watched, like the walls were holding their breath. Then I saw him. Mr. Ramirez stood on his porch, watering his tomato plants the way he always did at dusk. He'd rented Cottage 3 for almost 15 years. Retired Coast Guard, late 60s, tan as leather, always wearing the same faded fishing hat. When he noticed me, he lifted a hand. "Harper Lane," he called out, his voice warm but cautious. "Haven't seen you in a long time." I stepped closer to his porch steps. "Hi, Mr. Ramirez." He set the hose aside and leaned against the railing, studying my face the way people do when they want to understand how much you're hiding. "You all right? You look like someone stole your compass." It was such a simple thing to say, but it hit hard. I swallowed and nodded. "Just a long day." He didn't push. Good men rarely do. Instead, he motioned me to sit beside him on the steps. I did. "You hear about May?" he asked softly. I nodded. "Yeah." "She was a good soul," he said, eyes lifting toward the orange horizon. "That woman saw the best in broken people." I blinked against the sting in my eyes. "She did." After a moment, he sighed. "Your parents came by the day after she passed. Told folks they'd be taking over management." My heart thudded. "Already?" He nodded once. "Sounded like they had plans, but not the kind your grandmother would approve of." The ache in my chest sharpened. "Did Grandma ever talk to you about a will?" He went quiet for a long beat. Then he nodded again, slower this time. "She said she was meeting someone to make it official. Said she didn't want these homes falling into the wrong hands." My breath caught. "She said that?" His eyes met mine with the kind of sincerity that doesn't bend. Clear as day. A warm breeze drifted past us, carrying the scent of jasmine. But something cold was climbing up my spine. If she truly signed something, then my parents were lying. Not mistaken. Lying. Mr. Ramirez patted my shoulder. "May trusted you, Harper, more than anyone." I looked down at my hands, remembering the way she used to squeeze them when she told me she believed in the life I was building, even when my own parents didn't understand it. He stood up slowly. "You let me know if you need anything. These houses, they've been hurting without her. They could use a fighter again." His words stayed with me long after he disappeared into his cottage. I walked toward the shoreline behind Cottage 7, where the sky reflected on the water in melted shades of gold and crimson. This place used to be magic. It still was, but it felt cracked at the edges, like grief and deceit had seeped into the soil. As I stood there, something caught my eye. Brochures scattered near the side of the cottage, half tucked beneath a potted plant. I knelt to pick them up. Real estate brochures, upscale coastal properties, investment opportunities. Flip-ready homes. Cold washed through me. My parents had denied talking to a realtor, denied discussing sales, denied everything. But these brochures were fresh. These weren't here last month when I visited Grandma May. So why were they here now? A door creaked behind me, and I turned to see Lila, the young woman from Cottage 6, peeking out. "Harper?" she whispered. I stood. "Hey, sorry, didn't mean to scare you." She stepped outside, nervously twisting a hair tie around her wrist. "I'm really sorry about your grandmother. She was like sunshine." I smiled sadly. She really was. Lila hesitated before speaking again. "I'm not sure if I should say this, but there's been someone hanging around here. Not your parents. Someone else." I frowned. "Who?" "I don't know. Young guy, maybe 20s or 30s. I saw him by the storage shed 2 nights ago. He left when he realized I noticed." Her voice dipped. "He had a key." That cold feeling turned icy. "Did you tell anyone?" I asked. She shook her head. "I didn't know what it meant, but your parents have been coming and going a lot this week, and it felt weird. Weird. No, It felt like motive. I thanked her and walked toward the storage shed behind Cottage 7. The night air had cooled, but sweat gathered at my hairline as I tried the latch. To my surprise, it swung open with almost no resistance. The light inside flickered to life, revealing shelves of carefully labeled boxes, gardening tools, old tax returns, paint supplies. Grandma May labeled everything, so it didn't surprise me to see a box tucked neatly on the top shelf labeled, "Financial Records. Keep secure." I reached for it. The cardboard was dusty but intact. Inside were ledgers, rental agreements, receipts, every tenant payment she'd ever recorded. She kept detailed logs of repairs, including dates, contractors, and amounts. But as I thumbed through the most recent entries, my breath hitched. The handwriting changed. The careful loops and curls of May's letters gave way to sharp angles, rushed strokes. Someone else had been writing in these ledgers, fabricating repair bills, recording massive expenses that tenants later told me never happened, thousands missing. I sank onto the bench inside the shed, legs trembling. Whoever did this hadn't just anticipated inheriting the cottages, they'd already begun using them like an ATM. A rustling sound outside made me freeze. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I turned off the light and held my breath. The footsteps grew closer, crunching the gravel inches from the door. My pulse pounded in my ears. Then, just as I reached for my phone, they stopped. Silence. And then the soft retreat of someone walking away. When I finally stepped outside, the path was empty. But I noticed something glinting near the porch of Cottage 7, a small silver object half buried in the gravel. I knelt and picked it up. A key, not a house key, not a cottage key. No, this was small, flat, heavy. A safe deposit box key. My stomach dropped. I'd seen keys like this before. Grandma May used to keep one on her keyring when I was little. She said it was for the important things. I rose slowly, heart hammering. If this was her key, then someone else had another. Access to the box required 2 keys. Had someone already been inside? I hadn't planned to find anything tonight. But now I had. Real estate brochures, forged ledger entries, a mysterious visitor with a key, evidence of someone already tampering with records, and a safe deposit box key my parents claimed didn't exist. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't poor record-keeping. This was deliberate. I walked back toward the main house, clutching the key so tightly it left an imprint on my palm. The moon rose above the water, casting the cottages in silver light, as if watching over them, watching over me. I paused at the porch of Grandma's cottage, suddenly overwhelmed. All my life, I'd felt like the forgotten child, the one left off the Christmas cards, the one praised less, loved less, needed less, the one who learned to fix things because no one else stepped in to help. But maybe May saw exactly who I was becoming. Maybe this was no accident. Maybe she knew I'd be the one to protect what mattered. I sank onto the porch steps, exhausted. The night was warm, and the sound of the ocean soothed the tightness in my chest, even as fear and fury tangled inside me. I felt her here, May, in the chimes, in the lavender scent still clinging to the curtains, in the way the porch boards creaked beneath my feet. She hadn't left me nothing, she'd left me clues, and I was finally listening. I reached into my pocket and unfolded the small wrinkled note Lila had given me earlier that evening, written in May's handwriting on a scrap of grocery list paper. "If anything happens to me, look in the safe. You'll know what to do." A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. The words weren't poetic or dramatic. They were simple, steady, full of trust. She believed in me, even when my own parents never did. I closed my eyes, inhaling the salt air, and made myself a promise. I'd find the safe, I'd find the truth, I'd find every piece they tried to bury, and if my family wanted a fight, then they finally had one. Not the kind built on shouting or guilt or manipulation. The kind built on truth. The kind built on everything May taught me. I opened my eyes. The cottages stretched out before me, Worn, imperfect, loved. "Don't worry, Grandma," I whispered. "I'll take care of them." And for the first time since her passing, I knew I wasn't just saying it. I meant it. With my whole heart. The sun had barely risen when I stepped out onto the gravel path, dew still clinging to the blades of grass, the air thick with that familiar salt-sweet scent the Florida Keys carried like its own heartbeat. Morning light spilled lazily across the 10 vacation homes, their pastel colors glowing softly, mint green, lemon yellow, coral pink, all of them a little faded, a little crooked, and impossibly dear to me. They looked the same as when I was a child sweeping porches barefoot, but something in me recognized they might never feel the same again. I started my walk down the row of cottages, my fingertips brushing the railings as if touching old friends. Cottage 1 had a loose shutter again, the same one Grandma May and I repaired every summer. Cottage 2 had a chipped porch step. Cottage 3's wind chimes still played that soft harmony May loved. Everything looked normal, but grief and suspicion had a way of tinting normal things darker. I reached Cottage 3 just as Mr. Ramirez stepped out onto the porch, wiping his hands on his shorts. He still wore the same battered fishing hat he'd worn for at least a decade. "Morning, Lieutenant." He paused, corrected himself, and smiled. "Morning, Harper." I managed a small smile. "Morning. You're up early." He chuckled. "Old bones? Early hours?" Then he studied my face more closely, and the smile faded. "You didn't sleep." There was no point pretending. "No." "Thought so," he said. "You got the look of someone carrying something heavy." I glanced toward the ocean instead of answering. He didn't push, just nodded as if to say he was there if I needed him. Before I could speak again, a door creaked open behind him. Mrs. Holloway shuffled out onto her porch across the path, wrapped in a faded rose-colored robe, holding a steaming mug between her palms. "Harper, sweetheart," she called, her voice trembling with warmth. "Come here and let me look at you." I crossed the path and climbed her steps. She cupped my cheek as soon as I stood close enough. "Oh, honey," she whispered, "May would be so proud of you coming all this way. She talked about you every week." My throat tightened. "I miss her." "I know you do." She squeezed my hand gently. "She'd want you to take care of yourself, too." I nodded, though I knew taking care of myself wasn't something I'd ever been particularly good at. As if sensing my thoughts, she added, "You're more like May than you realize." Before I could ask what she meant, she glanced around cautiously, then leaned closer. "She told me, you know," she whispered, "about the will, about wanting things official." My breath caught. "She told you that?" "Oh, yes. Said you had the heart for this place. Said your parents didn't understand people, only money." Her words echoed what Mr. Ramirez had told me, amplifying my growing dread. If multiple tenants knew May wanted things formalized, then my parents had lied. They hadn't just misremembered or misunderstood. They'd erased something. A soft voice interrupted us. "Ms. Harper?" I turned to see Tariq, the young tenant from Cottage 8, standing at the base of the porch steps with a shy smile. "Morning," I greeted. He stepped forward, rubbing the back of his neck. "Lila told me you were here. We just wanted to say, May helped us when no one else did. She kept our rent low when my mom was sick. If you need anything from us, anything, you just ask." His sincerity was so open, so raw. It lodged itself inside my heart. "Thank you," I whispered. My tenants, no, Grandma's tenants, were more than neighbors. They were people she'd chosen to shelter, guide, and love, and now they were trusting me. By the time I left them and continued down the row, the sun was higher, casting sharp shadows beneath the palms. But the warmth did nothing to settle the chill running down my spine. The cottages felt familiar, yet wrong in ways I couldn't quite name. At Cottage 4, I noticed something that made me stop cold. A brand new AC unit. Shiny, pristine. not from any company May usually used. She always hired local contractors she trusted, men she fed banana bread and paid extra during hurricane season. This unit was expensive, modern, installed recently. But Mr. Ramirez had told me no repairs had happened. The ledger entries I'd seen last night came back to me, fabricated repairs, inflated costs. And this AC unit fit that pattern too perfectly. Someone had installed it not to help tenants, but to justify withdrawals. Anger simmered beneath my ribs. I needed answers. I walked toward the main house, where I kept the safe deposit box key tucked securely in my pocket. But instead of going inside, I stopped at the porch swing. Memories tugged at me. May reading mystery novels, knitting blankets for babies in the shelter, drinking sweet tea while telling me stories about the people these cottages had helped over the years. She always said, "Harper, these homes keep their secrets, but they'll tell them to you if you listen." Maybe that was why I'd always loved it here. Maybe that was why she trusted me. Inside the house, the citrus lavender scent clung like a fading echo of her. The kitchen wallpaper, yellow with tiny blue flowers, seemed a little dimmer, but still her. I moved into the small office she kept beside the pantry. Her handwriting was everywhere, on sticky notes, on envelopes, on the edge of a recipe card, on a list pinned above the desk, one word circled 3 times: ledger. I pulled the ledger from my bag and flipped to the pages with different handwriting. Someone had noted repairs, but I knew from tenants those never happened. Then one line struck me like a fist. Withdrawn. $4,000. Note. Ask Brooke? The breath left my lungs. Ask Brooke? No wonder Brooke had gone stiff when I mentioned paperwork yesterday. My parents weren't just hiding documents. Someone in this family had already started siphoning money. The air felt too thick, too heavy. I stepped away from the desk, pacing. May knew something was wrong before she died. She must have. Why else would she write that? And why had she kept it hidden? My eyes drifted toward the bookshelf. Something poked out, a folder shoved behind some old navy blue binders. I pulled it free. The label read, Lane Family, Personal. My heart hammered as I opened it. Inside were old photos, me painting shutters with Grandma when I was 8, Brooke posing in a frilly dress while I held a toolbox out of frame. All grit and no praise. Notes May had written, her handwriting shaky but fierce. The pages told a story she never said aloud. Harper sees hearts. Brooke sees attention. Carol sees image. Douglas sees numbers. But then, the note that froze me. Protect Harper. Don't let them sway her. She's stronger than she thinks. I sat down hard, the page trembling in my grip. Grandma had known. She'd seen it all. The favoritism, the lies, the slow erosion of trust. And she'd been preparing for something, to shield me from a battle she feared was coming. A soft knock startled me. I turned to see Lila standing in the doorway, clutching something in her hands. "Sorry," she whispered. "I thought you'd want this." She held out a small brown envelope, worn, slightly crumpled. My name was written on the front in May's handwriting. For Harper. Open when the time is right. I stared at it, throat too tight to speak. When did she leave this? "Mr. Ramirez found it under Cottage 5's porch step," Lila said. "He thought maybe it was meant for you." Though I took the envelope carefully, like it might break. My pulse raced, and for a second I wondered if opening it now was the right moment. But something in my gut said no. Not yet. I slipped it gently into my pocket. "Thank you," I said. Lila nodded and stepped back out quietly. I returned to the desk, hand resting on the envelope through my pocket, when something outside caught my eye. A shadow moving along the row of cottages. Tall, still, watching. I stepped onto the porch, squinting against the harsh sunlight. The figure paused at the far end near Cottage 10. The moment I took a step toward them, they slipped behind the building and vanished. A cold ripple moved across my skin. Someone was watching me. Maybe had been for days. For the first time since arriving in the Keys, fear curled at the base of my spine. Not the fear of losing the cottages, not the fear of confronting my parents, but the fear of being in the middle of something larger, darker, already in motion. I closed the screen door behind me, heart beating too loudly. Whatever my family started, whatever they were hiding, whatever someone else was trying to cover, it wasn't over. And I wasn't leaving. Not until I found the truth. Not until I uncovered every secret May tried to protect me from. Not until every lie my parents told collapsed under the weight of her trust in me. I stood on the porch, wind stirring my hair, staring down the row of cottages like they were a promise I was finally ready to fight for. And no matter who was watching, no matter who wanted me to stop, I was going to keep going. The bank smelled like cold metal and lemon cleaner, the kind of sterile scent that made my stomach tighten the moment I stepped inside. I didn't belong here, not with my salt-stained sandals and the safe deposit box key clenched in my sweaty palm, but I couldn't turn back. Not when this key might be the only thread left connecting me to whatever truth Grandma May tried to leave behind. The teller, an older woman with silver curls and warm brown eyes, looked up as I approached. Her name tag read, Donna, written in neat cursive. "Morning," she said gently. "How can I help you?" I swallowed. I think my grandmother had a safe deposit box here, under her maiden name, May Hollister. Her expression softened instantly. "Oh, sweetheart, I knew May for over 20 years. I'm very sorry for your loss." My throat tightened. "Thank you." She motioned me closer. And yes, she did have a box. She used it more often in the last few months. I wondered why. My pulse kicked. "Can I see it?" She hesitated only a second before nodding. "If you have a key." I held out the small silver key. It felt heavier now than it did last night. Donna examined it, then gave a sad smile. "This is hers," she said quietly. "Follow me." She led me past the teller counters, through a locked door, and down a narrow hallway that hummed with the sound of fluorescent lights. The walls were lined with small metal doors, rows and rows of them like a library of secrets. When Donna stopped at box 314, she paused. "This requires 2 keys," she explained. "Yours and the bank's." She inserted her key, then nodded for me to insert mine. My hand shook slightly, but the key slid in smoothly. Together we turned them. The mechanism clicked. Donna stepped back. "Take all the time you need." She left me alone with the open box, and I pulled the long metal drawer out, placing it on the small table in the corner. Inside was a manila folder, a small flash drive, and a leather-bound notebook tied with a thin ribbon. My heart sped up. I opened the folder first. Documents. So many documents. Rental summaries from the past year, bank statements, copies of tenant agreements, and then, even though I was bracing myself, not prepared for what I saw, a draft of a will. Typed, organized, with Grandma's name and details at the top, but unsigned. My breath escaped in a shaky exhale. It wasn't worthless. Drafts showed intent. But without a signature, without witnesses, without the official page, it wasn't enough to prove anything in court. I forced myself to keep going. Behind it were handwritten notes in May's neat script, dated weeks before her death. Final will signing Thursday. Notary, Ellis Rowan, witnesses, CP/MS. My pulse hammered. She had signed something. She had notarized something. So where was the final document? Why was only the draft here? I untied the ribbon around the leather-bound notebook and opened it. Pages of thoughts, reminders, small doodles, weekly grocery lists. And then toward the middle, her handwriting changed. Slanted, urgent. "If they find this before you, the will may disappear." I stared at those words until they blurred. Disappear. She knew. She suspected. A chill crept down my spine. She was trying to warn me. I turned the page carefully. There were indentations, as if she had written something hard enough to leave marks even after tearing the page out. I shaded it with the side of a pencil lying on the table. Words slowly appeared in the graphite. "Don't trust them." My knees went weak. I gripped the edge of the table until the shaking stopped. Them, my parents. Or someone else? I rubbed my eyes and reached for the flash drive. It was small and black, the type May never would have bought herself. I plugged it into my laptop and waited. A few folders appeared. Cottages, ledgers, legal keepsafe. My stomach flipped at the last one. I opened it. Inside was a document titled Final Will Signed, PDF. My breath stopped. I clicked. The screen flashed. Error, file corrupted. I tried again. Corrupted. I clicked Properties. The metadata loaded slowly, lines of information filling the window. Created, Thursday. Time 4:12 p.m. Location, May's home laptop. Last accessed, my heartbeat stalled. Last accessed by carol.laneinternetmail.com. Time, 2 days after May died. My mother had accessed this file. My mother had touched the will. My mother had deleted the only digital copy. Something inside me cracked. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes as the full weight of betrayal pressed down on me. I thought of her face last night. Tight smile, curt tone, dismissive shrugs. We've handled it. Yes. They had handled it. Too well. I gathered the flash drive and documents, placing everything carefully back in the folder. When I stepped into the hallway again, Donna gave me an encouraging nod. I hope you found what you needed, she said softly. I didn't trust my voice, so I only nodded and walked out into the sunlit parking lot, where the heat wrapped around me like a blanket I didn't want. I sat in my car, hands on the wheel, staring at the dashboard without turning the engine on. My heart was breaking and hardening at the same time. I thought I was alone until a buzz from my phone made me jump. A message from an unknown number. Stop digging, Harper. I swallowed, the back of my neck prickling. Another message popped up. You won't like what you find. Fear curled tight in my gut, but anger burned through it almost immediately. I refused to let a coward behind a blocked number scare me off. I put the car in drive and headed straight to May's cottage. I needed to think. I needed to spread everything out, map it, understand it. Mom's access to the file, the missing final will, the handwritten notes, the new AC unit, the forged ledger entries, the real estate brochures, the strange man with a key, the tenant's stories. Every piece pointed in one direction. Somebody, maybe several somebodies, wanted this entire estate cleaned out, erased, stripped, and sold before I got home. When I reached the cottage, I went inside and dropped the manila envelope onto the dining table. Papers slid out, wills, drafts, ledger copies, handwritten lists. I spread the evidence out like puzzle pieces. Draft will, signed will metadata, bank records, tenant notes, handwriting discrepancies, missing financial entries, safe deposit logs, forged repairs, unauthorized access. There were too many matching lines, too many coincidences, too many hands touching what wasn't theirs. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail notification. I pressed play. A pause. A breath. Then a distorted voice, male, low, threatening. You should have stayed away. The line clicked off. My chest tightened. Whoever this was, they didn't want me getting closer. But they were too late. I walked to the window, staring out at the cottages glowing in the late afternoon sun. These were more than rentals. They were pieces of people's lives, pieces of May's heart, pieces of mine. I wasn't going anywhere. I needed help, though. Someone who understood the legal weight of what I was holding. I grabbed my keys, snatched the folder from the table, and drove straight to Andrea Sloane's office. Andrea greeted me in a crisp navy blazer, her expression calm but alert. She cleared space on her desk, and I laid everything out in front of her. She read silently, piece by piece, lips tightening with each new document. When she finally looked up, her voice was low but steady. Harper, she said, this isn't just suspicious. This is criminal. I swallowed hard. I know. And you need to understand something else. She tapped the shaded pencil indentation of May's warning. People don't destroy a will unless they have something to lose. I nodded. They were going to sell the cottages. Andrea sighed. And they still might try. My throat tightened. I won't let them. She studied me, then leaned back. We need witness statements. The notary. The 2 witnesses she listed. Anyone who saw activity around the time of her death. I nodded. And, she added, we're filing an injunction before anyone touches a single property document. A rush of relief and fear hit me at once. Finally, someone was on my side. Someone who believed me. Someone willing to fight. When I left Andrea's office, the sun was already low, casting long shadows over the street. I pulled into the driveway of the cottages just as the first hints of twilight settled in. I turned off the engine, listened to the chirp of frogs, the whisper of the breeze. A sound came from the side of cottage 2. A footstep. Slow, deliberate. My breath stilled. I stepped out of the car, gripping my bag tightly. Hello? I called out. No answer, but I felt eyes on me, watching, measuring. A figure shifted behind the cottage, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with unsettling ease. And then they slipped out of sight. I stood frozen, heart hammering, the final slant of sunlight turning everything around me gold and ominous. Whoever that was, they weren't just trying to hide the truth. They were trying to erase it. And they weren't finished. Neither was I. I found the drawer open before I even reached the office. Papers that had been neatly stacked the night before were scattered across the floor like someone had ransacked the room in a hurry. My stomach lurched as I stepped inside, scanning the mess for the documents I'd left on the desk. May's ledger copies, the suspicious repair invoices, the notes I'd collected from tenants. All of it was gone. Completely gone. For a moment I just stood there, breathing too fast, every instinct in my body tightening the way it had when I was a kid bracing for one of my father's cold, quiet lectures. Then something metallic glinted near the threshold. I bent down and picked it up, a torn scrap of a real estate brochure. And on the back, in my father's handwriting, the beginning of a phone number. The air left my lungs. This wasn't random. This wasn't an accident. Someone had come into May's cottage, her home, and taken only the documents tied to the inheritance. I felt heat rising beneath my skin, a tremor of anger, sharp and clean as a blade. I grabbed my keys, stormed out of the cottage, and didn't stop moving until I reached my car. The drive to my parents' house blurred into a smear of palm trees and headlights. By the time I slammed the car door shut in their driveway, my hands were shaking so badly I had to curl them into fists just to keep them steady. Inside, the house was warm and bright. Laughter drifted from the dining room. My parents and Brooke around the table, plates still half full, their perfect little family moment interrupted when I stepped into the doorway. My father turned first, irritation flickering across his face before he replaced it with a tight, practiced smile. "Harper, didn't expect you." My voice came out cold. "Why were you in Grandma's cottage?" My mother blinked hard, feigning confusion. "What are you talking about?" I pulled the torn brochure from my pocket and tossed it onto the table. This was on the floor, next to the empty drawer. Someone broke in and took every document I was reviewing. Brooke scoffed. "Someone probably broke in looking for cash. Calm down." I stared at her. "Do thieves usually leave untouched antiques and break into only the office? Do they take only financial papers and nothing else?" Her smirk twitched. Dad pushed his chair back with a sigh. "You're jumping to conclusions." I stepped forward. "Your handwriting was on this." His jaw clenched, barely perceptible but impossible to miss once you knew his tells. "Coincidence," he said. "Lies. Face-to-face lies, delivered without flinching. And that was somehow worse than the break-in itself." I looked at him, then at my mother, then at Brooke. 3 faces I had spent most of my life trying to make sense of. 3 people who had made me feel like an outsider in my own family. 3 people who now stood between me and the woman who had loved me more than any of them ever did. My mother leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Harper, you're being dramatic. You're tired. You're emotional. Losing May. Don't, I said sharply. Don't use grief as a shield for what you're doing. Her lips thinned into a straight white line. We're not doing anything, she insisted. You accessed her safe deposit box, I said quietly. Her eyes widened before she could hide it. You deleted her digital will, I continued. My father shot her a warning look, but she was already spiraling. You have no proof, she said, voice rising. You don't know what you're talking about. I took a slow breath. Then tell me why the ledger, her ledger, shows $4,000 missing with a note that says, Ask Brooke. Brooke sat up straight, cheeks flushing. That's not what it looks like. Mom said that was fine. Mom's gasp was sharp enough to pierce glass. Brooke! My father slammed his palm on the table. Enough! Silence fell, heavy, suffocating. I stared at Brooke, whose bravado had crumbled into something raw and frightened. She looked so small suddenly, so young, so clueless about the world outside her curated Instagram bubble. Where did the money go, Brooke? I asked softly. Her chin trembled. I needed it, okay? For a hotel, for a brand deal, for work. Work, I echoed. She flinched at my tone. I thought Grandma said it was fine, she whispered. Mom said it was practically mine. My heart splintered, not for her actions, but for how deeply she believed she was entitled to everything she touched. I turned to my mother. You told her that? Mom's face twisted. You were gone, Harper, off living your life. You couldn't expect us to pay attention to both of you. The words hit harder than I expected. Something inside me, something I thought had toughened long ago, cracked open. My father stood abruptly. We are not discussing family issues like this. No, I said. We're discussing legal issues. His head snapped toward me. Legal? The will, I said. The missing will, the safe deposit box, the forged repairs, the unauthorized withdrawals, the real estate brochures, and now the break-in. My mother whispered, Harper, don't do this. I stared at her, the woman who'd spent her life praising Brooke's smallest efforts and dismissing my biggest accomplishments. The woman who couldn't bring herself to hug me when I moved across the country at 17. The woman who couldn't tell me the truth if her life depended on it. You did this, I whispered back. My father's voice hardened. Watch your tone. No, I said. Watch yours. He froze. I exhaled slowly, letting years of hurt sift through me before settling into something solid, something that felt almost like peace. You're right, I said softly. I did leave. I left because no matter how much I tried, I was never enough for you. And that was fine. I accepted it. Brooke blinked at me, confused. My mother's lips trembled faintly. My father remained stone. But Grandma thought I was enough, I continued. Enough to help her. Enough to protect her tenants. Enough to carry on what she spent her whole life building. I leaned forward slightly. And the more you lie, the clearer it becomes how much she saw, long before I did. Something flickered in my father's eyes, something like fear. I straightened. I'm not backing down. And what do you think happens now? He asked, voice sharp. I looked him directly in the eyes. I file. I take everything I have to court. I let a judge see the truth. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Brooke made a soft, wounded sound. My father glared. You would tear your family apart for some run-down cottages? I swallowed hard. No. I'm stopping my family from tearing itself apart. For a moment, none of them moved. None of them breathed. Then I turned toward the door. My mother called after me. Harper, wait! But I didn't. Outside, the night air hit me like a wave. Humid, salty, real. I leaned against my car for a moment, letting the tension drain from my shoulders. I drove back to the cottages with the windows cracked, letting the breeze cool my face. My anger slowly melted into something softer. Sadness, maybe. Or resignation. or the acceptance that no matter how this ended, my relationship with my family would never be the same. When I pulled into the gravel lot, the cottages glowed under the porch lights, each one a small beacon of memory and promise. I stepped out of the car, shoulders aching from the weight of everything I'd just confronted. Mr. Ramirez was sitting on his porch again, his face dipped in shadow. When he saw me, he stood. "You all right?" he asked gently. For a second, I almost said yes, but I shook my head. He walked down the steps and placed a steady hand on my shoulder. I didn't realize how badly I needed that simple gesture until my eyes burned. "You're not alone," he said. "Your grandmother built this place so you'd always have somewhere to stand." I nodded, swallowing the knot in my throat. "Thank you." He squeezed my shoulder once more before returning to his porch. I walked toward Cottage 3 and sat on the top step. The ocean whispered in the distance. A warm breeze rustled the palms. Somewhere down the row, a tenant laughed softly. And for the first time that day, I let myself cry. Not from weakness, but from the truth finally spilling out of me. They tried to take what didn't belong to them. They tried to erase a woman who spent her whole life giving, but I wasn't going to let them. Not anymore. 2 days later, the court date arrived in the mail. As I held the envelope, my heartbeat settled, not into fear, but into certainty. I would fight, and this time I wouldn't fight alone. The phone call stayed with me all night, the distorted voice repeating in the dark like a warning I couldn't turn off. By the time morning came, my body felt wired and restless, every nerve on edge. I didn't bother making coffee, didn't bother brushing the sand from the porch steps where I sat half the night. Instead, I grabbed the manila folder, slid it under my arm, and headed straight for my car. Andrea answered on the second ring. "You sound tense," she said. "I got a threat." Silence hummed through the line before her voice returned, firm and controlled. "Document it. Screenshot the number. Forward the voicemail to me. And whatever you do, don't wander around alone today." "I'm going to find the notary," I said. Andrea exhaled. "Good. That's the right next step. If the will was signed, we need confirmation from everyone involved. Be careful, Harper." I hung up, tucked the phone into the cup holder, and drove toward the address Mrs. Holloway had given me, a small yellow house with a peeling porch and a mailbox shaped like a pelican. The place looked quiet, peaceful, the kind of home where someone baked banana bread on Sundays and watered plants every afternoon. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I stepped back, ready to try a third time, when the door cracked open an inch. A frail voice said, "If you're here selling roof treatments, go away." "It's Harper," I said quickly. "Harper Lane." The door opened wider, revealing a tall, white-haired man leaning on a cane. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were bright, sharp, observant, unafraid. The kind of man who noticed everything. "You're May's granddaughter," he said before I introduced myself. My breath caught. "Yes," he nodded once. "I wondered when you'd come." He stepped aside and motioned me in. The inside of his house smelled faintly of old books and cedar oil. A recliner sat in the center of the living room, its cushions worn but clean. "Sit there," he said. "It cost more than my first car, and someone should enjoy it." I sat, and he lowered himself onto the sofa. His cane rested across his knees. "You're Ellis Rowan," I said. "The notary." "Still am," he replied, "though I retire next spring. Your grandmother told me someone might come asking." My heart quickened. "She talked to you?" "Always did," he said with a soft smile. "Sharp woman, sharp enough to know trouble was coming." I swallowed. "Did she sign something with you?" He nodded. "A final will, at her kitchen table. She'd prepared the paperwork, and she insisted it be official. Stamped, witnessed, and logged." I felt tears sting the back of my eyes. "Who witnessed it?" He tapped the side of his head. "Carol Parker and Marcus Son." The names matched the initials in her notebook. My hands trembled slightly. "Do you remember the date?" I do. And I remember she was clear, calm, strong as ever. She talked about tenants, plans she had for the cottages, and about you. Me, I whispered. She said you understood the homes, Rowan said, and the people in them. Said your parents didn't understand anything except asset value. I closed my eyes, forcing down the swell of emotion. Do you have the logbook? I asked. His expression dimmed. Wish I did. Someone stole it. My breath snagged. Stole it? He nodded grimly. A week after May passed, broke the lock on my back door, rifled through every drawer, didn't take a penny or my watch. Only that book. The room seemed to tilt. Did you tell the police? Of course. They called it random theft. He snorted. But I've been on this earth long enough to know when something's targeted. I pressed a shaky hand to my forehead. Do you have anything left? Anything that proves the signing happened? Rowan studied me for a long second. Then he pushed himself off the sofa and shuffled across the room to a small chest of drawers. I always keep backups, he said, for situations exactly like this. He pulled out a worn manila envelope and handed it to me. Page 72, he said. May Hollister, signed, stamped, witnessed. I opened the envelope with hands that didn't feel like mine. Inside was a photocopy of the notary logbook entry. Neat, official, unmistakably real. Date, time, 2 signatures, notary stamp, everything we needed. I looked up. This is everything. He patted my shoulder. I know, that's why I kept it ready. I fought a sob. Thank you. He nodded once. Your grandmother trusted you. It's time you trusted yourself. When I stepped out of his house 20 minutes later, sunlight hit me hard. The world felt brighter and darker at the same time. I sat in my car and stared at the envelope on the passenger seat. Proof. Real proof. And someone had tried to destroy it. My phone buzzed. A call from Pastor Lucia's church. I answered quickly. Harper, the pastor said softly. I found something else in our storage room. An envelope addressed to you. Your grandmother left it with me, just in case. Can you come by? My heart kicked. I'll be there in 10 minutes. The church sat at the end of a quiet street shaded by sprawling live oaks. Pastor Lucia, a short woman with warm brown skin and soft eyes, met me at the door. She loved you deeply, she said as she led me inside. You know that, right? I nodded, unable to speak. She guided me into her office and handed me a sealed manila envelope. My name was written across the front in Grandma's handwriting. Delicate, firm, familiar enough to crack my heart open. I peeled it open carefully, like it was something breakable. Inside were documents. A partially signed earlier will. A notarized statement from May saying she intended to update the will to give me managerial rights. A handwritten note. Legacy is not money. It is protection. Protect the homes. Protect the people. If someone tries to take them, follow the truth. Then a final sheet, a photocopy of an entry in a notary logbook, the same date Rowan had given me. She left this with me months ago, Pastor Lucia said softly. Said she feared someone might try to alter her wishes. A wave of grief swept through me, heavy and warm and devastating. She knew, I whispered. She did, the pastor said, and she trusted you to finish what she couldn't. I tucked the documents into my bag, holding them like fragile glass. Thank you, I whispered. You're welcome, child, she said. Be careful. Some people fear the truth more than anything. Her words followed me as I stepped outside. The sun was dipping lower, bleeding yellow into the horizon. I walked to my car slowly, feeling the weight of everything pressing against me. Proof in my bag, a warning in my phone, a storm rising around my grandmother's legacy. Halfway to the parking lot, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something inside told me to answer. I lifted it to my ear. Hello? A distorted voice hissed softly. Stop digging, Harper. This won't end how you think. Before I could respond, the call cut off. My heart pounded as I scanned the parking lot. Empty. Silent. Still. But someone had been watching. Someone who knew I was getting closer. Someone who realized they were losing control. I closed my eyes, gripping my phone, forcing my breath steady. I wasn't turning back. Not now. Not ever. By the time I reached the cottages again, dusk had deepened into soft twilight. Porch lights flickered on one by one like fireflies. 10 homes, 10 stories, 10 pieces of a legacy someone was willing to destroy to claim. I stepped out of the car, clutching the notary photocopy in one hand and May's letter in the other. When I reached the main porch, a soft breeze lifted the chimes overhead, tinging the air with their familiar melody. I paused, looking out over the cottages glowing gold in the last slant of light. "I'm here, Grandma," I whispered, "and I'm not letting them take this." Behind me, the shadows shifted. I turned, but the path was empty, only the wind, the chimes, and the ocean. Still, every instinct in my body knew the truth. Someone was watching, and they weren't finished. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because now I had the truth. The morning air tasted like humidity and old paint as I stepped onto the porch with the notary photocopy pressed to my chest. For the first time since May died, I felt like I wasn't walking blindly through her shadow. I was following her footprints. But that feeling didn't last long, because when I opened my email, the illusion of progress shattered. A new message sat at the top of my inbox. Subject line: Rent adjustment effective immediately. Sender: Lane Property Management Coastal Homes. Org. My breath caught. My parents. They had created a property management email, overnight, and issued rent increase notices to every tenant. 40% hikes. A $50 administrative fee. Mandatory prepaid maintenance charges. The kind of numbers that would force people out. I clicked through the notices one by one, heart sinking deeper with each message. Every tenant at May's cottages had received the same aggressive, impersonal email. A knock sounded on the porch rail. I looked up to find Mr. Ramirez holding his phone, his jaw clenched tight. "Tell me this isn't real," he said. "It's not legal," I replied. He lifted an eyebrow. "That isn't what I asked." I swallowed. "It won't stand, I promise." His shoulders slumped with a sigh heavy enough to sag him forward. "I can't afford an increase like that, Harper. None of us can." Behind him, Lila stepped out of Cottage 6 with tear-filled eyes. "They're trying to force us out, aren't they?" More tenants emerged. Tariq from 8, Mrs. Holloway leaning on her walker, 2 retirees who had lived here since I was a teenager. Their faces held the same fear, the same heartbreak. "They're trying to make the cottages look unprofitable," I said, "so they can justify selling them." Anger rippled through the group like a silent storm. Tariq shook his head. May promised these homes would be stable, affordable, that this was a place for people who needed a break from life. He didn't have to say the next line out loud. My parents were breaking that promise. I nodded once. "No one is leaving, not on my watch." They watched me, waiting, for answers, for leadership, for something stronger than emails and shadows. I'd never asked to be the one in charge, never envisioned stepping into this role. But the weight of their trust sat on my shoulders like something sacred. I took a breath. "Everyone meet me tonight on May's porch, 7 o'clock. Bring any notices, emails, anything new." They nodded one by one, each expression softening into a glimmer of hope. As they dispersed, I headed back into the house and grabbed my phone, dialing the number for Coastal Bay Realty, the company printed on the brochures I'd found. A woman answered. "Coastal Bay Realty, this is Tina." "Hi," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm calling about an inquiry made on the Hollister cottages." "Oh," she said. "Yes, that was, let me see, Douglas Lane and his wife, Carol." My pulse spiked. "Do you know what they were planning?" "Well," she said thoughtfully, "they asked for valuations, projections for converting long-term rentals into short-term vacation units, and a timeline for listing all 10 properties within the next 60 days. 60 days. 2 months. Everything clicked into place. The rushed paperwork, the break-in, the ledger manipulation, the rent spikes. They were preparing to sell. Fast. Before anyone could intervene. Before I could get evidence. I thanked her and hung up, fighting the tremor rising in my hands. They weren't just being selfish. They were desperate. Maybe scared. And desperate people made reckless decisions. I dialed Andrea. "Tell me you found something," she said. "Oh, I found something," I replied. "They're trying to evict tenants through rent hikes, and they plan to sell all 10 homes in 2 months. A beat of silence. "Good God," she whispered. "Okay, we file immediately. Emergency injunction, tenant protections. If they keep pushing, this could turn into attempted estate fraud." "I know." "But Harper," she added carefully, "this means your parents aren't just lying, they're actively hiding malfeasance." I knew she was right, but hearing it said aloud scraped at something raw inside me. I hung up and spent the next hour drafting statements from tenants, printing notices, and gathering every scrap of documentation. The evidence pile grew thick, overwhelming, damning. At 7, the tenants gathered on the main porch. Lanterns glowed softly around us as the sky faded into dusky purple. They sat in a semicircle, quiet, anxious, hopeful. I stood in front of them, holding May's notary photocopy in one hand and the rent notices in the other. "Here's what we're dealing with," I began. "The rent increases are illegal. They can't evict you without going through a proper process, and they can't change management while the estate is under dispute." Mrs. Holloway raised her trembling hand. "Harper, dear, why are your parents doing this?" My throat tightened. "Because they think the cottages belong to them." Mr. Ramirez frowned. "But May told me they didn't understand the cottages." "That's what she thought," I said softly. "And she tried to protect them. She signed a final will leaving managerial rights to me. But that will has disappeared." Gasps rippled through the group. "Someone took it," I said. "But I have proof it existed. Proof it was signed. Witnesses who were there, and a notary who still remembers everything." They stared at me, stunned. A wave of determination, fierce, protective, rose in me. "I'm filing to stop this," I continued. "But I need all of you. Witness statements, letters, anything that shows what May intended. Anything you heard, saw, or suspect." Tariq immediately stepped forward. "I saw your parents sneaking into the shed 2 nights before May passed." Mr. Ramirez nodded. "They came after dark, went into the office, stayed nearly 30 minutes. They weren't checking on her. She was already asleep." Lila raised her hand timidly. "I saw a man I didn't recognize walking behind the cottages with a key. He didn't belong here." Mrs. Holloway leaned forward. "May told me she locked her last will in a place only you would think to check." I felt my breath hitch. "She told you that?" "Oh yes," she said. "Said she trusted your sense, trusted your integrity." My throat closed with emotion I didn't expect. We spent the next hour collecting everything. Stories, receipts, suspicious encounters, overheard arguments, tenants' old letters from May promising affordable rent. By the time the group dissolved into the night, the evidence folder was twice as thick as before. I sat alone on the porch afterward, the chimes whispering overhead. "You're doing the right thing," a voice said behind me. I turned to see Mr. Ramirez standing on the bottom step, hands tucked into his pockets. He looked tired but resolute. "When your grandmother got older," he said, "she said the cottages weren't buildings. They were people's second chances. Their first hope. Their last hope." I swallowed. "I know." He studied me with eyes full of something like pride. "You're her girl. She knew you'd do what was right." The lump in my throat made speaking difficult. "I'm trying." He nodded and turned toward his cottage. "Try harder. It's time." When he disappeared into the night, I sat there listening to the waves, the wind, the distant murmur of tenants settling back in. And for the first time since arriving, I didn't feel like a visitor. I felt responsible. Responsible in a way that was terrifying and empowering at the same time. I went inside, set the evidence folder on the dining table, and began drafting an affidavit summarizing everything I'd collected. Hours passed, words blurred, my handwriting drifted, but I didn't stop. Around midnight, my phone buzzed, another unknown number. I stared at the screen, pulse throbbing. Then I answered. A slow, deliberate exhale crackled on the other end. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," the distorted voice murmured. "Turn back before someone gets hurt." Cold sank through my veins. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows you don't belong here," the voice hissed, "and someone who's not afraid to make you leave." The line went dead. I sat stiffly, phone still pressed to my ear, heart pounding a hard, steady rhythm. The house creaked softly behind me. Something shifted in the shadows. A reflection flickered in the window, a tall silhouette standing near the porch steps before slipping into the darkness. I rose slowly, every instinct on high alert. I walked to the window. Nothing. Just the wind, just the dark, just the ocean. But I knew better. Someone was watching, following, waiting. My parents weren't working alone, and I was officially in the middle of something much bigger, much uglier, than a family dispute. I closed the curtains, locked the doors, and whispered into the silent house. I'm not backing down. Because if someone was willing to threaten me, break in, and erase May's wishes, then they were afraid, and that meant I was getting close. Closer than ever. The morning after the threats felt unreal, as if the world had shifted a few inches to the left while I slept. The air was too still, the sunlight too bright, the quiet too heavy. I stood on May's porch with a cooling mug of coffee, staring across the row of cottages while the notary photocopy lay like a heartbeat inside the folder on the table behind me. Today mattered. Today was the day I gathered official statements. If the will was gone, then witness testimony was everything. I didn't trust my parents. I didn't trust whoever was calling me. But I trusted the truth. And that had to be enough. I headed to Mrs. Parker's house first, walking past the soft crunch of gravel underfoot. She lived on the other side of the church, in a little house with bright pansies lining the front walkway, and a white porch swing that creaked when the breeze shifted. She opened the door before I could knock. "May's girl," she said with a smile that reached her pale blue eyes. "I was expecting you." I blinked. "You were?" "Oh, sweetheart," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "Your grandmother told us you'd be the fighter, said when things got difficult you'd know to stand up." The words hit deeper than I expected. I stepped inside, letting the scent of fresh lemon cookies and old books wrap around me. Mrs. Parker led me to her dining table where a single sheet of paper already sat waiting. "I wrote down everything I remember," she said. "The day of the will, what she said, who was there." "You remember the day?" I asked softly. "Of course. May was glowing. Said it was the first decision she'd made in a long time that felt right." Warm pride pooled in my chest. She handed me the page, bold handwriting, steady and clear despite her age. "I'll sign an affidavit," she added. "Swear to it, whatever you need." I exhaled. "Thank you. This means everything." She smiled and took my hand. "It's what May would want." I left with her statement tucked carefully in my folder and walked straight to Marcus' son's place. He lived above the bait shop near the marina, a cramped apartment that smelled of fish and coffee. He answered the door looking half awake and mildly annoyed until he recognized me. "Oh, May's granddaughter." "Yes," I said. "I need your help." He scratched the back of his neck. "This is about the will, right?" I nodded. "You were one of the witnesses." He opened the door and motioned for me to step inside. "May said this might happen," he said. "Said her family wouldn't take things well." I tried not to flinch at that. "Do you remember what she said that day?" He poured a cup of coffee for each of us before speaking. "She said she trusted you. Said you understood the community. Said you'd protect the cottages if anything happened to her." I inhaled shakily. She said that to both of you. She said it to anyone who listened, he replied, but mostly she said it with her actions. He gestured for me to hand him the affidavit form I'd brought. He read it carefully, then signed with a firm, steady hand. Thanks, I whispered. No problem, he said with a shrug. May did a lot for us. Time to return the favor. I stepped outside feeling stronger, steadier, more rooted in something real. With 2 witness statements secured, I headed back toward the cottages to organize everything before meeting Andrea. But as I turned the corner near Cottage 9, a flash of movement caught my eye. A man stood at the far end of the gravel path, tall, hood pulled low, motionless. He stared straight at me. Though I couldn't see his eyes, I felt them. Cold, calculating. My breath hitched, but I forced myself not to freeze. What do you want? I called out. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. I took 1 step forward. He took 1 step back. Another step forward. Another step back. Then he disappeared behind the corner of the last cottage. I ran toward the spot, heart pounding, adrenaline surging, but when I turned the corner, the path was empty. No footprints on the sand. No sound. No shadow. The air grew tight. My hands shook as I pressed the folder to my chest. I was being watched, more closely than ever. I walked briskly back to May's cottage. When I stepped inside, the phone on the wall began ringing immediately. My pulse spiked. I hesitated, then lifted the receiver. A soft inhale echoed on the other end. I didn't speak, neither did the caller, but the breathing was unmistakably deliberate, not panicked, not rushed, slow, precise. Then, finally, a voice. You're getting too close. My grip tightened on the receiver. Who are you? Silence stretched for 3 seconds. Then, you should have left when we told you. The line went dead. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to move. Fear could paralyze or ignite, and I wasn't letting it win today. I placed the receiver back on its hook, grabbed the folder, and headed for my car. Andrea needed to know everything. Her office sat near the old marina, small brick building, clean, sun-faded above the doorway. She let me in with a tight expression the moment she saw my face. You look like you saw a ghost, she said. Not a ghost, I replied shakily. A man, watching me, following me. She motioned for me to sit. Start at the beginning. I took a breath and told her everything. The threats, the figure on the path, the silent calls, the escalation. Andrea listened without interrupting, but her face grew darker with each detail. When I finished, she leaned forward. This isn't just inheritance fraud anymore. This is intimidation, possibly criminal harassment. We'll alert the judge and file for protective measures. I swallowed. Do you think my parents... I don't know yet, she said carefully. But I do know they're not acting alone. Someone else is involved. I nodded reluctantly. Now, she continued, show me what you found. I placed the notary photocopy on her desk. Her eyes widened slightly as she scanned it. This is huge, she whispered. This corroborates the signing. We just need the notary's affidavit, and the judge will temporarily freeze every asset your parents are touching. I pulled out the witness statements. I have those too. She took them like sacred pages and laid them neatly beside the photocopy. This case, Andrea said slowly, just became very winnable. A wave of relief washed over me, but it was mixed with something heavier, something like grief, something like betrayal. My parents will hate me for this, I murmured. Andrea's expression softened. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't look like loyalty, it looks like courage. I shook my head. I just want to protect what May built. I don't want to destroy my family. She nodded. But they're already destroying it. You're just trying to save what you can. Her words hung between us, painful and true. We spent hours assembling a watertight legal package. Affidavits, statements, timeline, evidence, notarized copies, photographs. When we finished, the folder was thick enough to weigh down my entire arm. And it felt like something alive. Something powerful. When I left Andrea's office, night had already settled, the moon hanging full and pale above the marina. I drove home slowly, headlights carving narrow paths through the humid darkness. But when I pulled into the gravel lot, I stopped cold. The porch light of May's cottage was shattered. Glass glittered like stars across the steps. The door hung open an inch. Ice slid down my spine. Someone had been inside. Again. I stepped out quietly, heart in my throat, folder clutched tight. I scanned the shadows. Nothing moved, but the darkness felt thick, watching, breathing. I pushed the door open. The house was silent. Too silent. I stepped into the living room, expecting chaos. But instead, nothing was disturbed. The picture frames were still straight, the curtains unmoved, the furniture untouched. Only one thing was different. The envelope with May's note, the one that read, "Open when the time is right," was gone. Stolen. My breath left me in a sharp, painful gasp. Someone didn't want me to find out what she wrote. Someone was trying to erase her voice completely. I closed the door with trembling hands, locking every bolt, every latch. The house creaked softly around me, the old wood shifting as if protesting what had been taken. Then I sank onto May's couch, folder pressed to my chest. I wasn't safe anymore, but I wasn't stopping. Whoever was watching, whoever was threatening, whoever was breaking in and stealing what wasn't theirs, they had just made the biggest mistake of all. They made me angry. And now? Now I was ready for war. By sunrise the next morning, I had slept no more than an hour. Every creak of May's cottage kept jerking me awake, convinced the man from last night had come back. The shattered porch light still glittered on the steps like broken warning signals, and each time I looked at the empty spot where May's sealed letter had been, my chest tightened. But fear wasn't going to save the cottages. Fear wasn't going to honor her. So I swallowed it down and gathered the folder. The affidavits, the notary photocopy, the forged ledger pages, the printed emails from my parents' fake property management account, the real estate brochures, everything. Today, Andrea and I were filing for an emergency injunction. Today, I was stepping into the courthouse not as the forgotten daughter, but as May's defender. By 8:30, I pulled into Andrea's office parking lot, the morning sun glaring off the windshield hard enough to sting. She stood outside waiting for me, wearing a charcoal gray suit and the expression of a woman ready to bulldoze whoever got in her way. "Tell me you slept," she said as I stepped out. "Define slept," I replied. She didn't smile. "Let's get to work." Inside, her desk was covered in legal forms, printouts, highlighted lines, and a thick binder she labeled Lane Estate, Emergency Filing. She motioned for me to sit, then opened the binder to the first section. "These affidavits are solid," she said. "The witness statements match the notary timeline perfectly, and the threats, well, they're evidence of intimidation." I exhaled. "Do you think the judge will grant the injunction?" "Honestly," she said, flipping through pages, "I think he'll grant more than that." My stomach fluttered with something like hope, and something like dread. Andrea slid a signature page in front of me. "Your part." My hand hovered over the pen. "Once I sign this," I whispered, "there's no going back." Andrea met my eyes. "Your parents crossed the line first. You're not destroying anything. They are. You're protecting what May wanted." I nodded. My throat burned. Then I signed my name. The ink wasn't even dry before Andrea grabbed the folder, clicked her briefcase shut, and said, "Let's go." On the drive to the courthouse, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, tenants texting updates, screenshots of additional emails from my parents' fake management account, rent notices stuck on doors overnight, even a picture from Tariq of a stranger circling the cottages at dawn. Andrea frowned. "Don't respond right now. We'll handle all of this once the injunction is in place." When we stepped into the courthouse, the air was cold enough to raise goosebumps on my arms. Andrea walked with quick, purposeful steps, her heels clicking a sharp rhythm across the tile floor. I followed her through security, through a hallway of old portraits, up a flight of stairs, until we reached the clerk's office. A clerk with glasses hanging from her neck looked up. "Good morning. Filing for—" "Emergency injunction under estate fraud," Andrea said, sliding the binder across the counter. The clerk's eyebrows lifted slightly. She flipped through a few pages, then nodded. "I'll take this straight to the judge," she said. "He'll review it this afternoon." A strange energy pooled in my stomach. Part dread, part hope, part something more powerful than either. Walking out of the clerk's office felt like stepping back into sunlight after a long time underground. But the day wasn't nearly over. The next step was finding the missing paper trail. "We need the bank," Andrea said. "If your mother accessed the digital copy of the will, there might be logs." My pulse sped up. "She's going to freak out." "She should," Andrea replied. At the bank, Donna recognized me immediately and waved us back to the same hallway with the deposit boxes. "I didn't think I'd be seeing you again so soon," she said with a sad smile. "Did someone else access May's box?" Andrea asked carefully. Donna nodded slowly. "Yes, her daughter Carol came 2 days after May passed. We have logs for that." My breath caught. "Can we see them?" "Only with written authorization from the estate manager," Donna replied. "Which," Andrea said, tapping the binder, "is exactly what we're filing for." Donna hesitated, then said quietly, "I'll get the preliminary logs. I can't release them officially, but I can confirm whether there was suspicious activity." She left us alone in the hallway for a moment. When she returned, she held a small printout with 2 entries. May's access, 3 weeks before her death, Carol Lane, 2 days after her death. Donna lowered her voice. "Your mother checked the box out for 26 minutes. When she brought it back, the bank manager noticed the folder inside was thinner." Andrea's knees nearly buckled with vindication. "This seals it," she whispered. "Your mother tampered with estate documents." My chest tightened painfully. I knew it was true. I'd felt it in my bones. But hearing it said, seeing it in ink, it twisted something inside me. I stepped outside for air, leaning against the side of the building. The Florida heat pressed against my skin, but it didn't calm the shaking in my chest. She did it. My mother did it. She took the will. She erased May. Andrea joined me a moment later. "We have enough to halt everything," she said. "Now we need to talk witnesses." I nodded and followed her back to the car, but as we reached the parking lot, everything shifted. A figure stood beside my car, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark hoodie despite the heat. My pulse dropped into my stomach. Andrea inhaled. "Is that—" "Yes," I whispered. "That's him." The man turned his head slightly, as if listening to something only he could hear. Then he stepped forward. Slowly, purposefully. I froze. Andrea stepped in front of me. "Sir, this is private property. You need to leave." He stopped several feet away. His face was shadowed beneath the hood, but I could see the twist of his mouth, almost a smile. "You should stop digging, Harper," he said softly. His voice, calm, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world. My blood went cold. Andrea squared her shoulders. "If you don't leave, I'm calling security." The man tilted his head, studying her like she was an annoyance. Then he turned his eyes back to me. "They won't protect you," he murmured. "Nobody will." I stepped forward despite the fear rattling inside me. "Is that a threat?" He smiled slowly. "It's a warning." Then he turned and walked away, slipping between 2 cars before disappearing completely. Andrea called the bank security immediately, but they couldn't find him. It was like he evaporated. I sat in my car trembling until the shaking dulled into anger, deep, simmering anger. "I'm done being scared," I finally whispered. Andrea put a steadying hand on my arm. "Good. because things are only going to get louder. We drove straight to the church next. Pastor Lucia met us at the door, her brow creased with worry when she saw my pale face. "Child, what happened?" "Someone followed us," I said. "Threatened me." Her eyes widened with quiet fear. "Then you must move quickly." She guided us into her office. A small table lamp glowed warmly beside stacks of hymnals. She placed a folder in front of me. "This is everything May left with me," she said. "Notes, letters, instructions. She was afraid of what your family might do." I opened the folder and found a handwritten page in May's flowing script. "Harper, if you are reading this, I could not finish what I wanted to. Protect the cottages. Protect the tenants. Protect the truth. Trust your instincts, not their words." The knot in my throat nearly cut off my air. Pastor Lucia rested a hand on my shoulder. "She believed in you more than anyone." I closed my eyes. "I hope I'm doing this right." "You are," she said. "You're the only one who ever could." By the time Andrea and I stepped outside, the sun was low in the sky, painting the horizon in orange and lavender. We headed back toward the cottages to gather the last tenant statements and prepare for the hearing. But when I turned onto the gravel road leading to May's property, something felt off, wrong, before I even saw it. The tenants were gathered outside the porch of Cottage 1, shouting, pointing, panicking. I parked and ran. "What happened?" I yelled. Lila grabbed my arm, eyes wide and shaking. "Your parents sent someone," she cried. "A man with a clipboard. He said he was here to assess the cottages for sale." My heart plunged. "Where is he?" "He's still inside Cottage 4, Mr. Ramirez said, fury cutting through his calm voice. "I told him to get out, but he wouldn't." Andrea stepped toward the cottage. "That's illegal. Let's go." We marched toward Cottage 4, and when Andrea threw the door open, the man spun around. He was the same one from the courthouse. The same one lurking behind Cottage 10. The same voice calling me in the night. His smile this time was slow and chilling. "Well," he said softly, "looks like I found what I came for." I stepped forward. "Get out." He didn't move. "Now," I said, voice shaking with fury. Andrea pulled out her phone. "I'm documenting this for the injunction." The man's eyes flickered to the phone, just for a second, but it was enough. He stepped past us, walking out into the dusky light as if we were nothing but furniture. "This isn't over," he said over his shoulder. Then he vanished down the gravel path. Andrea exhaled shakily. "That was your parents' agent." "No," I said quietly. "That was something else. Someone else." I looked at the tenants' fearful faces, at the cottages glowing in the fading sunset, and something inside me hardened into steel. "I'm done reacting," I whispered. "It's time to fight back." Andrea nodded. "Then get ready. Because tomorrow, everything changes." Tomorrow was the hearing. Tomorrow I would stand in front of a judge with the truth in my hands. Tomorrow, one way or another, someone was going to break, but it wasn't going to be me. I woke before dawn, long before the alarm I'd set for 6. The sky outside May's cottage was still ink black, the ocean hidden in shadow, the air thick with that early morning stillness that feels more like holding your breath than peace. Today wasn't a normal morning. Today was the hearing. Today I was stepping into a courtroom to face my parents, my sister, and the stranger who'd been circling my life like a shark waiting for blood. I sat on the edge of the bed, breathing slowly, feeling the pulse of my heartbeat against my palms. For a moment, I let myself imagine what Grandma May would say if she were here. "You stand straight, sweetheart. You speak steady. And you don't let fear touch what truth can carry." I swallowed hard. "I'll try." By the time I dressed and walked into the kitchen, a faint light was starting to push across the horizon. The cottages glowed dimly, like soft pastel ghosts waiting for a dawn they knew was coming. I poured coffee into her favorite pelican mug, took one long sip, and set the mug gently beside the folder that held every piece of evidence I'd collected. Notary photocopy, witness statements, threat messages, emails, logs, ledger pages, real estate brochures, bank confirmations. And May's letter, her voice, telling me exactly who she trusted. When I stepped outside, the tenants were already gathering, all of them, every single one. Standing in a small circle near the main house, dressed neatly, somberly, respectfully. Mr. Ramirez stepped forward first. "We wanted to see you off," he said. "May stood up for us. Today we stand for her." My throat tightened painfully. Lila hugged me, whispering, "Please bring the cottages home." Tariq handed me a small homemade breakfast sandwich wrapped in foil. "You'll need strength," he said, cheeks reddening. "Protein helps." Mrs. Holloway grasped my hands in her frail but determined fingers. "Tell that judge the truth," she said. "That's all you ever needed." I blinked hard against tears. "Thank you, all of you." "Go," Mr. Ramirez said. "We'll be here waiting." Their belief filled me like something warm and steady, something I didn't know I'd been missing. Andrea's car pulled in just as I stepped toward mine. She rolled down the window. "You ready?" she asked. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm going anyway." "That," she replied, "is what being ready actually means." The courthouse looked different today, sharper, heavier, like its walls already knew the story about to clash inside them. People filed in quietly, dressed in muted colors, paperwork clutched in hands, whispers floating through the marble hallways. My parents were there. My father stood tall, his shoulders squared, wearing the same suit he wore to client presentations when I was a kid, the suit he wore when he wanted to be obeyed. My mother sat beside him, lips pressed tight, eyes bright with fear or anger or both. Brooke stood slightly behind them, makeup flawless, arms crossed like a defensive shell around her frame. My father spotted me first. His jaw tightened. My mother's face hardened. Brooke looked away. Andrea leaned close. "Ignore them. You're not here for them. You're here for the truth." We took seats at the petitioner's table. My parents sat at the respondent's side, whispering furiously to their attorney, a man whose sunken eyes and frantic scribbling suggested he'd walked into a storm unprepared. The bailiff called for silence. Then the judge entered. He was older, silver-haired, with a face that carried both sternness and something softer. Experience, maybe. A man who'd seen too many family battles but never grew numb to them. "Court is now in session," he said. "Case concerning the estate of Ms. May Hollister." My parents sat straighter, ready to play their part. The judge reviewed the docket, flipping pages before clearing his throat. "We will begin with the respondents." My father rose with perfect confidence. "Your Honor, the 10 vacation homes belonged to my mother-in-law. Upon her passing, they default legally to her daughter and myself. There is no will. There is no evidence of a will. Our daughter," he gestured dismissively toward me, "is attempting to claim ownership without standing." My mother nodded vigorously. "She was hardly ever here, Your Honor. She doesn't know anything about the cottages. She doesn't deserve—" The judge held up a hand. "Thank you. Please sit." They sat stiffly, exchanging glances. The judge turned his gaze to me. "Ms. Lane, you submitted an envelope for review. Please step forward." My stomach tightened, but my legs carried me forward. I handed him the thick envelope Andrea and I had assembled, a mountain of truth built from May's trust. He opened it slowly. The courtroom went silent. So silent I could hear my own pulse. He removed the notary photocopy first. His eyes flicked up briefly, curious, surprised, before moving on. Then the affidavits from Carol Parker and Marcus Sun. Then the bank access logs. Then the digital metadata showing the deleted will. Then the forged ledger pages, emails, threat messages, photos, copies of May's handwritten notes. The judge paused halfway through and raised an eyebrow. He read another page, then another. Then he leaned back. And he laughed. Not mocking, not loud, but a soft, startled laugh of disbelief, The kind of laugh a man makes when the deception in front of him is so obvious he can't help but marvel at it. My parents stiffened so visibly I could feel the crack in their composure from across the room. The judge set the papers down, folded his hands, and looked over his glasses at my parents. "Well," he said quietly, "this is interesting." No one breathed. My father fumbled for words. "Your Honor, she—" The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Lane, this evidence strongly suggests a signed will existed, and further suggests someone with access to Ms. Hollister's home, or her deposit box, removed or destroyed it." My mother's face drained of color. Brooke closed her eyes like she could pretend she wasn't part of this. The judge continued, voice steady. "Such an action is considered tampering with estate documents and could constitute fraud." Mom let out a strangled gasp. Dad whispered, No, we didn't, there is no proof. The notary logs, the witness affidavits, the bank records, and the digital metadata," the judge said, lifting the pages, "paint a very clear picture." My father sank down slowly. My mother's hands began to tremble. "Furthermore," the judge added, "the unauthorized rent increases, property evaluations, and attempted sales are all in violation of estate law." Andrea shot me the smallest satisfied smile. The judge clicked his pen. "I am issuing an immediate injunction halting all financial actions related to the cottages. Additionally, I am granting temporary managerial authority to Ms. Lane until the full probate hearing." Mom whispered, horrified, "You can't give her control." The judge turned his gaze to her. "Mrs. Lane, given the evidence of misconduct, she is the only person I can trust to manage the properties fairly." Brooke's lips parted. She looked like a child watching a perfect world crumble into dust. My father stared at me with something between fury and regret. Then the judge said something that shifted the entire room's energy. "This court strongly encourages mediation." He removed his glasses. "Because if this proceeds to the full fraud investigation, there will be consequences." Silence fell again. Then, "Court is adjourned." The gavel struck. My parents didn't move for several seconds. Neither did I. Then the world resumed motion. The bailiff called for order. People shuffled out of the room, papers rustled, footsteps echoed. Andrea exhaled deeply beside me. "Harper, you did it." But all I felt was heaviness, relief tangled with sadness, justice mixed with grief. Victory wasn't clean. It never is when it comes to family. As we stepped into the hallway, I turned and found my father staring at me, not with anger, but with fear. And for a moment, I didn't know which one hurt more. We walked out into the sunlight, and the Florida air wrapped around me like a warm, humid blanket. Andrea placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "You ready for mediation?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said. "I think I finally am." Because today wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The mediation room was colder than the courtroom, somehow smaller too, even though the table stretched nearly the length of the space. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, a single framed beach print, crooked, faded, hung behind the mediator's chair. The kind of room meant for forced resolutions and quiet humiliations. The kind of room where families unraveled. My parents were already seated when Andrea and I walked in. My father sat rigid, hands clasped tightly in front of him, his knuckles so white they looked bloodless. My mother stared down at a stack of tissues she wasn't using yet, twisting them between her fingers like rope she planned to break. And Brooke perched beside them like a fragile ornament, arms folded across her chest, face pale, mascara smudged faintly beneath her eyes. None of them looked at me. Andrea squeezed my arm as we took our seats across the table. "Remember," she whispered, "you hold the strongest cards in the room. You set the tone." I nodded, though my stomach churned like I was back in middle school clutching a science project no one believed I'd made myself. The mediator, a composed woman in her 50s with soft curls and an air of exhaustion, sat down and drew a deep breath. Thank you all for coming. We are here for one reason: to discuss a resolution outside of court, given the judge's injunction and the pending disputes over the Hollister properties. She scanned each face. This is not a place for accusations, it is a place to negotiate. Her gaze landed on me last. Ms. Lane, since the injunction favors your position, I'd like you to begin. My pulse thudded in my ears. Every eye at the table, except maybe Brooks, lifted to me. I inhaled slowly. I'm not here to punish anyone, I said. I'm here because the cottages matter. They mattered to May. They matter to me. And they matter to the tenants who've stayed there for years. My father scoffed quietly. This sentimental angle, Andrea cut in sharply. Mr. Lane, please wait your turn. He shut his mouth, but his jaw twitched. I continued, keeping my voice steady. I want the cottages preserved, managed ethically, maintained affordably. That's what May wanted, and that is the only outcome I'll accept. Silence followed. Then the mediator nodded. All right, let's hear the respondent's position. My mother finally lifted her head. Her voice wavered. We were overwhelmed. We didn't know she'd signed anything. We didn't know she'd spoken to other people. Andrea arched an eyebrow. You had access logs showing you entered her box after her passing. Stop, my mom whispered. Please. My father exhaled sharply. We made mistakes, all right? Mistakes, but we're not criminals. We didn't destroy anything intentionally. Andrea slid a printed copy of the digital metadata across the table, the record showing my mother's email as the last person to access and delete the PDF. My mother closed her eyes. I panicked, she said in a thin voice. She sent the file to our shared account. I opened it while we were planning the funeral, and I just didn't want to deal with it. I didn't think you were ready to handle all this, Harper. My chest tightened. Not ready? Or not the one you preferred? She swallowed. I didn't want this to split the family. It split the family long before I got here, I said quietly. My father rubbed his temples. We weren't trying to hurt anyone. Selling the properties was necessary. For money, I said. For survival, he corrected, voice cracking more than I expected. That startled me. Survival. My mother's shoulders slumped, and for a moment she looked older than I'd ever seen her. We're in debt, she whispered. Deep debt, Kyle's loans, your father's early retirement, medical bills, Brooks' business. Brooks shifted uncomfortably. I stared at each of them, shock cooling into something else. Understanding, maybe. Not forgiveness. But context. So you thought the cottages were your way out? I said. My father didn't deny it. His silence confirmed everything. The mediator leaned forward. Perhaps now would be a good time to discuss what resolution you're hoping for. Andrea gestured for me. I took a breath. Full managerial control of all 10 cottages. Legal authority to maintain them, reinvest in them, and oversee all decisions. No sales, ever. My parents stiffened. My voice remained calm. In return, I'm willing to provide a monthly stipend drawn from cottage revenues, enough to help stabilize their finances without compromising operations. My mother blinked. A stipend? Yes, I said. Not out of obligation, out of compassion. For the first time, Brooke looked directly at me. Her mascara-smeared eyes were wide, not with anger but disbelief. Why would you help us? I swallowed. Because someone has to break the cycle. She looked down, chin trembling. My father cleared his throat, voice softer than I'd ever heard it. What about your sister? Where does she fit into this? I turned to Brooke. That's up to her. She bit her lip. I don't deserve anything. No, I said gently. But you need something, help, direction, support, maybe therapy, maybe accountability. Her eyes watered. She nodded. Andrea leaned forward. This offer is generous, more generous than most clients would ever consider. The mediator clasped her hands. Mr. and Mrs. Lane, this is a path forward. And frankly, the alternative, continuing the case, could have severe consequences. My parents stared at each other for a long moment. Something unspoken passed between them. Fear, regret, exhaustion. Then, slowly, my father nodded. "We accept," he said softly. My mother wiped at her eyes. Yes, we accept." Brooke whispered, "Thank you," barely audible. Relief washed over the room like a warm tide. The mediator drafted the preliminary terms. Andrea reviewed them carefully. My parents signed. I signed. Brooke signed, too, even though she wasn't legally required, her hand shaking the whole time. When it was done, my mother stood but didn't leave. "Harper," she said quietly, "can I talk to you?" "Alone." Andrea gave me a questioning look. I nodded. My mother stepped into a small alcove near the hallway. Her breath trembled as she spoke. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything, for choosing wrong, for not seeing you, not really seeing you." My throat tightened. "Mom, no," she said firmly, voice cracking. "Let me finish. You were always the strong one, the brave one, the one who didn't need us. And instead of being proud, I resented it. I shouldn't have." Her eyes glimmered with tears. "I'm so sorry I made you feel lesser than your sister." For a moment I couldn't speak. The apology I had wanted for years, decades, had finally arrived, not wrapped in excuses or guilt, but truth. It didn't erase everything, but it mattered. "Thank you," I whispered. She squeezed my hands. "Take care of the cottages, take care of yourself, and maybe someday, take care of us too." I nodded. When she stepped away to rejoin my father and Brooke, Andrea appeared at my side. "You handled that beautifully," she said. "Truly." I exhaled slowly. It hurts, but it feels right. Then it is. We walked out into the afternoon sunlight together. The sky was bright blue, the breeze warm, the courthouse steps wide and open. For the first time in a long time, stepping outside felt like stepping forward. Andrea paused at her car. "You know this isn't the end. This is just a new beginning." "I know. And you're ready for it." I nodded. "Yeah, I am." When her car pulled away, I stood alone for a moment on the courthouse steps, letting the sunlight settle into my bones, letting the weight of the day dissolve. Then I walked toward my car, folder tucked under my arm, the same folder that held evidence and heartache and truth and the promise of a future I wasn't afraid of anymore. Tonight, I would return to the cottages. Tonight, I would tell the tenants everything. Tonight, I would tell May everything too, standing on her porch, under her chimes, letting the wind carry the words she never got to hear. The cottages were safe. The legacy was safe. Because I was finally strong enough to protect it. And finally, I wasn't fighting alone. The sun had barely begun to rise when I pulled into the gravel lot of the cottages. Soft pink and gold streaked across the horizon, like someone had brushed the sky tenderly with watercolor. The palm trees swayed just enough to make the chimes on May's porch sing a sleepy greeting. After everything that had happened, the break-ins, the threats, the hearing, the mediation, I expected this moment to feel heavy, like the ending of a war. But it didn't. It felt like home. I stepped out of the car, the humid Florida air settling on my skin like a warm hand. The cottages glowed in the early light, mint, peach, seafoam, butter yellow. Still crooked, still imperfect, still beautiful, and now, finally, safe. Mr. Ramirez was the first to see me. He stood on his porch watering the tomatoes he'd nurtured for years, his old fishing hat tilted against the sun. When his eyes met mine, he smiled, a full, genuine smile that reached every line in his weathered face. "Well, Harper Lane," he called out, "looks like you won." I walked toward him, shaking my head softly. "It wasn't about winning," he chuckled. "Maybe not to you, but to the rest of us, it means everything." The porch doors opened one by one. Tenants stepped out, Lila waving with sleepy enthusiasm, Tariq holding a cup of coffee he clearly hadn't tasted yet, Mrs. Holloway wrapped in her rose-colored robe. Even the retirees from Cottage 7, usually up much later, were out early, leaning on their cane and walker like they refused to miss a moment. I felt something catch in my throat. These people, these imperfect, wonderful people, were why May built this place. She didn't build cottages. She built community, resilience, second chances. And now it was my turn to carry all of that forward. "Tell us," Tariq said. "How did it go?" I took a breath. We reached an agreement. Silence hung for a beat, waiting, hoping. "My parents accepted full managerial control being transferred to me," I said. "No sales, no listings, no forced moves. The cottages stay exactly as they are." A chorus of relief rippled through the group. Mrs. Holloway actually pressed her hands together in front of her chest like she might cry. "And the tenants?" Lila asked tentatively. "You're all safe," I said. "The injunction protects every one of you. Rents stay stable. No more notices, no more threats." A cheer went up, small, quiet, but full of joy. I couldn't help it. I smiled. The tenants crowded closer, some touching my shoulders in gratitude, others giving soft congratulations. For a moment, the porch felt like it was breathing with life, like the entire community had exhaled at once. After they drifted back to their cottages, I walked toward the main house. The porch boards creaked the same way they always had, the kind of familiar groan that used to annoy me as a child but now felt grounding, like May's voice murmuring, "You're home, sweetheart." I stepped inside and let the air meet me, a blend of lavender soap and citrus cleaner still lingering faintly from when she used to scrub the counters herself. The sunlight spilled through the slats, dust floating lazily like tiny golden galaxies. Today was the first morning I walked through the house not as a visitor or an intruder or a frightened granddaughter holding evidence, but as the caretaker May had chosen. Not officially in her will, but in every conversation she had with neighbors, every handwritten note she left scattered through the drawers, every lesson she taught me with her hands and her heart. I went to the kitchen, poured coffee into the pelican mug, and stood at the window overlooking all 10 cottages. I imagined May beside me, her elbow brushing mine, her soft laugh as she pointed out who needed help fixing a shutter or whose garden needed pruning. That was her way. Fix what needed fixing, help who needed helping, love without expecting applause. "Morning, Grandma," I whispered. Just then, the wind picked up, rustling the palms and making the porch chimes sing. A warm shiver ran through me. I took it as her answer. After breakfast, I began my usual rounds, something that had started as a desperate attempt to maintain order during chaos, but had slowly become the favorite part of my day. I tightened a loose hinge on Cottage 2's window, helped Lila replant her dying hibiscus, changed the light bulb on Cottage 5's porch, and adjusted the crooked shutter on Cottage 1 that always seemed determined to twist itself out of line. By mid-morning, my parents arrived. I saw their car before I saw them, my father's Navy sedan pulling into the lot with less confidence than usual, my mother sitting stiffly in the passenger seat, her eyes scanning everything as if trying to reconcile this place with the version she'd built in her mind. I walked toward them slowly, unsure how this moment would unfold. Dad stepped out first, smoothing his shirt unnecessarily. He looked older, tired, like the weight he'd carried so long had finally settled onto his shoulders instead of fueling his pride. Mom stepped out next. She looked fragile, her posture quieter than I'd ever seen it. Brooke wasn't with them today, which somehow made the air feel easier. Dad cleared his throat. "We wanted to come see how you were doing." I nodded. "I'm all right." Mom's eyes wavered before she found her voice. "We wanted to say, we're sorry. Again." Her voice cracked at the end, and for a moment she looked like the version of herself she used to be. The version that used to braid my hair before school, the version that used to tuck in the corners of my blanket just a little too tightly. Before life and pride and fear changed her. "I know," I whispered. Dad stepped closer. "We don't expect you to forgive us right away, but we want to try." I looked at him, seeing not the enemy he had been during the hearing, but the flawed, frightened man he had become. "You can start," I said, "by respecting May's wishes." He nodded. "We will." Mom hesitated, then asked, "Can we help? Maybe volunteer? Or do small things around the cottages?" It surprised me, the sincerity in her voice. "You can," I said softly, "but it has to come from a good place, not guilt." Her tears fell silently. Dad put an arm around her shoulders. "We'll do better." I nodded. "We all will." We talked for a while longer, slowly, cautiously, like people learning each other for the first time. When they finally left, I stood in the gravel driveway and watched their car disappear down the road. I didn't feel healed, not fully, but I felt open, and maybe that was enough for now. Later that afternoon, I walked down to the dock behind the main house. The water glittered beneath the sun, small waves tapping against the pilings in a rhythmic hush. I sat on the edge, dangling my feet above the surface the way I used to as a kid while May hummed tunes beside me. In my pocket was the small journal I'd started keeping. Inside it, I'd copied the most important words my grandmother left behind. Protect what matters. Lead with integrity. Choose truth even when it's hard. Choose kindness even when it hurts. I closed the journal gently. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the cottages turned gold once more, I gathered everyone on the main porch. We shared food, simple dishes everyone contributed. We laughed. We talked about repairs and renovations and ideas for the future. Someone played music from a small speaker, the chimes sang along. I watched them, my new family, the unconventional kind, and felt peace settle in my chest like a warm stone. When the gathering finally quieted and the tenants drifted back to their cottages, I stood on the porch alone, the moon rising above the palms. I turned toward the wind. "Thank you," I whispered. "I hope I made you proud." The chimes answered, and in that moment, I believed she heard me. Before going inside, I took one last look at the row of cottages, lit softly, standing steady, carrying stories older than me, and stronger than the people who tried to steal them. This was home. This was legacy. This was mine to protect. And maybe, in a way I never expected, this was the beginning, not the end. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, thank you. I hope it reminded you that family isn't just who we're born to, it's who shows up when it matters. If this story touched you even a little, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me where you're listening from. Share it with someone who believes in integrity, in second chances, in quiet strength. And if you want more stories like this, stories of truth, resilience, healing, I hope you'll stay with me, like, comment, subscribe, and come back for the next chapter of courage. We still have so many stories left to tell.